What if a woman 6 months pregnant was publicly pushed into a deep pool by her own husband and his mistress at a lavish party with 800 guests, all because she couldn't swim and came from poverty? Imagine this. You're standing by a sparkling pool, wearing an expensive red dress, your belly already rounded, when suddenly you're shoved hard from behind. Icy water engulfs you. You thrash desperately, air running out, the muffled laughter of the crowd cutting like knives. And you know you're about to die along with your unborn child. But what happens when the man who saves you is none other than the most notorious Mafia boss in Las Vegas? The one who has silently loved you for 7 long years, watching your every step from the shadows, and is now ready to burn the entire city to the ground to protect you. Can a love suppressed for years be strong enough to bridge the chasm between a rundown trailer park and a world of power and luxury? Can blood, bullets, and guilt ever be defeated by love? Today, we're stepping into this tear-soaked story of passion and redemption, a story that will make you ask yourself, how far would you go to forgive the past of the person you love in order to find happiness? Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. My name is Emily Harper, and in October of the year 2025, I was 28 years old, though I felt closer to 50. Life in North Las Vegas had worn me down to nothing but bone and stubbornness. I lived in a rusted single-wide trailer on the edge of town, the kind with cracked windows sealed by duct tape and a roof that leaked every time the desert wind howled. My 6-year-old son Noah slept on a mattress on the floor because the bed frame had collapsed months ago, and I couldn't afford another. We ate canned beans and day-old bread from the church pantry most nights, and on the worst days, we ate nothing at all. I worked double shifts, waitressing at a 24-hour diner off the old highway, my feet swollen inside shoes with holes in the soles. My hands were rough, my cheeks hollow, my brown hair thin from too many months without proper food. I hadn't slept through a full night in years. Eviction notices, overdue medical bills for Noah's asthma, the constant fear that Child Protective Services would decide I wasn't fit. I was always cold, even when the desert sun burned the metal walls of the trailer until they blistered your fingers. That night in early October, the wind was sharp and unforgiving. I was walking home from the late shift, clutching a paper bag with leftover fries for Noah's breakfast, when I heard the groan. It came from the alley behind the diner, low, pained, human. Most people would have kept walking. North Las Vegas alleys were dangerous after midnight. But something in that sound pulled at me, the same way Noah's fevered whimper pulled me out of exhausted sleep. I stepped into the shadows. There, slumped against a dumpster, was a man bleeding from a wound in his side. His white dress shirt was soaked dark red, his expensive black suit torn. Even in the dim streetlight, I could see he was fair-skinned, handsome in a hard, carved way, high cheekbones, dark hair falling across his forehead. He looked 35, maybe 36. His eyes, when they opened, were the clearest gray I had ever seen, sharp with pain and something fiercer. I should have run. Everyone knew who controlled these streets. Anthony Rossi, Tony to those who feared him, was the Italian-American boss who owned half the underground gambling in Las Vegas and most of the construction contracts that kept the city growing. He was whispered about in the diner, ruthless, wealthy beyond imagining, dangerous. And here he was, bleeding out in my alley. He tried to push himself up, hand pressed to his side, but staggered. Without thinking, I dropped the paper bag and caught him before he hit the ground. He was heavy, solid muscle under that ruined suit, and for a moment we both froze, his gray eyes locked on mine. "Get out of here," he rasped, voice low and rough. "You don't want to be seen with me." But I couldn't leave him, not like this. I half dragged, half carried him to my ancient Ford pickup parked behind the diner. He protested weakly, but the blood loss made him slump against me. I drove too fast through empty streets to my trailer, praying Noah would stay asleep. When we arrived, I helped Tony inside, laid him on my own narrow mattress, the only one with sheets, and tore open his shirt to see the wound. It was a gunshot, clean through the side, no exit wound visible. I cleaned it with the vodka I kept for emergencies, stitched it as best I could with a sewing needle sterilized in boiling water, and thread from Noah's old clothes. My hands shook the entire time. Tony watched me silently, his jaw clenched against the pain, sweat beading on his forehead. "Why are you doing this?" he asked at one point, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't look up from the stitches, because nobody else would. When it was done, I gave him the last of my antibiotics, save for Noah, and covered him with my only clean blanket. He fell into a fevered sleep while I sat on the floor beside the mattress, watching his chest rise and fall, terrified he would stop breathing. Hours later, just before dawn, 3 black SUVs pulled up outside the trailer. My heart stopped. Noah stirred in his sleep on the floor pallet. I stood between the door and the bed, ready to fight with nothing but my trembling hands. The door opened slowly. 6 men in dark suits entered, guns visible but not raised. The leader, a tall man with a scarred face, looked at Tony on my bed, then at me. "Boss," he said quietly. Tony's eyes opened. He looked at me first, long, unreadable, then nodded to his men. "She saved my life. She's under my protection now." The scarred man inclined his head. "Yes, sir." They lifted Tony carefully onto a stretcher and carried him out. Before he left, he reached for my hand. His fingers were warm, strong, despite the blood loss. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily," I whispered. "Emily Harper." "Emily," he repeated, as if tasting it. "I owe you a debt I can never repay." Then he was gone. For weeks afterward, things changed in small, impossible ways. Noah's medical bills disappeared. Groceries appeared on my doorstep. Fresh fruit, real meat, things I hadn't bought in years. My landlord suddenly forgot about the back rent. I knew it was Tony, but I never saw him. I told myself it was just gratitude, nothing more. But late at night, when the trailer was quiet and Noah slept, I would remember the weight of him against me, the way his gray eyes had looked into mine like he was seeing something precious for the first time. And I would feel a dangerous warmth in my chest, something I had no right to feel. I didn't know then that Tony Rossi was fighting a war inside himself. Every night in his penthouse atop the newest casino on the Strip, he stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city he ruled and felt the guilt gnaw deeper. He had ordered men killed. He had built his empire on fear and blood. And yet one poor, half-starved waitress had risked everything to save him without asking for anything in return. He watched my trailer from a distance, never close enough to frighten me, always through his men's reports. He learned about Noah's asthma, my double shifts, the nights I went hungry so my son could eat. And with every detail, the remorse grew heavier. He told himself he was only repaying a debt. But the truth, the violent, tearing truth he barely admitted even to himself, was that from the moment I caught him in that alley, he had fallen, hard, completely, irrevocably. He, Anthony Rossi, the most feared man in Las Vegas, was in love with a destitute waitress who didn't even know his full name. And the conflict inside him was tearing him apart. The need to protect me, to give me everything, warring with the terror that his world would destroy me. He stayed away. For 7 years, he watched from the shadows, loving me in silence, punishing himself with distance, until the night I needed him again. The months after Tony Rossi disappeared from my trailer slipped by like sand through cracked fingers. Noah's breathing treatments arrived without bills. The power company stopped sending shut-off notices. Someone paid the overdue rent on the single-wide, and suddenly the landlord smiled at me instead of threatening eviction. I knew it was Tony. Every unexpected envelope of cash tucked under my door, every bag of fresh groceries with apples that actually smelled like apples, those were his silent apologies for bringing danger to my doorstep. I told myself I was grateful, nothing more. But in the quiet hours after Noah fell asleep, when the desert wind rattled the thin aluminum walls and the cold seeped through every crack, I would sit on the sagging porch steps and stare at the distant glow of the Las Vegas Strip. Somewhere in that river of light lived a man who owed me nothing, yet kept giving everything. And the warmth that thought stirred in my hollow chest frightened me more than hunger ever had. I was 29 now, thinner than ever, my collarbones sharp under faded t-shirts, my eyes ringed with permanent shadows. The diner cut my hours when tourist season slowed, and even with Tony's invisible help, fear never left me. One late bill, one flare-up of Noah's asthma, one broken-down truck, and we would be on the street. I had learned long ago that kindness from powerful men always came with a price. I waited for Tony to collect his. He never did. Instead, one rainy November afternoon in the year 2018, Ryan Caldwell walked into the diner. He wore a tailored navy suit, shiny leather shoes, and a smile that made the other waitresses whisper. He sat in my section, ordered coffee he barely touched, and watched me with bright blue eyes that promised the world. He left a $50 tip on a $3 check and his business card. Ryan Caldwell, Caldwell Luxury Developments. When I thanked him softly, voice timid from exhaustion, he said, "A beautiful woman like you shouldn't be working herself to death in a place like this." I should have thrown the card away. But that night, Noah coughed until he vomited, and the pharmacy refused my check because the account was overdrawn again. I sat on the trailer floor crying silently so I wouldn't wake him, clutching Ryan's card like a lifeline. Ryan courted me the way drowning people clutch air. Flowers delivered to the diner, dinners at restaurants where the menus had no prices, new inhalers for Noah that appeared without explanation. He told me I deserved better than scraping by, that he could give us security, a real home, a future. He never asked about the mysterious help I sometimes received. He simply erased the need for it. I told myself he was salvation. Tony found out, of course. One freezing January night in 2019, after my shift, I walked to my truck and found him leaning against it. The parking lot was empty, sodium lights buzzing overhead. He wore a long black cashmere coat that probably cost more than my yearly wages, his fair skin pale against the dark fabric, gray eyes stormy. "Emily," he said quietly. My name and his voice still did strange things to my heart. I stopped a few feet away, clutching my thin jacket closed. "Mr. Rossi." He flinched at the formal name. "You're seeing Ryan Caldwell." It wasn't a question. Fear prickled my skin. "That's none of your business." "It is when he's using you to get to me." His voice was low, controlled, but I heard the strain. "Caldwell's been laundering money for the Moretti family out of Los Angeles. They want my construction contracts. He thinks marrying you will give him an in, make me trust him." I laughed, a brittle sound. "You think every man who notices me only wants something from you?" Pain flashed across his face. "I think you deserve someone who sees you, not what you can get him." Anger flared through my exhaustion. And who would that be, Tony? You? The man who sends money like I'm charity but never shows his face? You think I should wait forever for shadows? He stepped closer, and I smelled expensive cologne and cold night air. I stay away because my world would destroy you, but Caldwell, he'll destroy you faster and smile while he does it. I shook my head, tears stinging. At least Ryan offers a future I can see. You offer secrets. The remorse in his eyes was a living thing. Emily. No, my voice cracked. You don't get to warn me away from the first real chance I've had in years. You don't get to control me from a distance forever. I pushed past him, climbed into the truck, and drove away with tears blurring the road. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing alone under the buzzing light, hands in his coat pockets, looking like a man watching his heart drive off into the dark. That was the last time I spoke to Tony Rossi for 5 years. Ryan proposed in March with a diamond I later learned was financed through shady loans. We married in a quick courthouse ceremony because I was desperate to believe in stability. Ryan moved us into a rented house in Henderson, 3 bedrooms, actual heat, a yard for Noah. For the first time in years, I slept without fear of eviction. But the cracks appeared slowly. Ryan's promises of partnership in his company never materialized. He mocked my diner clothes, my lack of college, my trailer park manners. He controlled the money, doled out allowances, told me I was lucky to have him. When I asked about his late nights, he grew angry. When I found strange deposits in our accounts, he said I wouldn't understand business. And the mysterious help stopped. No more surprise groceries, no more paid bills. I told myself it was good. I was standing on my own now. Deep down, I knew Tony had withdrawn because I'd told him to. In the spring of 2024, Ryan announced we were moving to a mansion in Summerlin. "I've made it big, baby," he said, kissing my cheek with lips that felt cold. "Time to show the world we belong." I smiled and nodded, but fear coiled in my stomach. That same week, Tony Rossi stood in his penthouse office overlooking the Strip and stared at photographs his men had taken. Emily thinner again, eyes haunted, standing beside Ryan Caldwell at a groundbreaking ceremony. Ryan's hand possessive on her waist. Tony's fist shattered the crystal tumbler in his grip. Blood ran down his fingers, but he didn't feel it. For 5 years, he had kept his promise, stayed away. For 5 years, he had watched her struggle under Caldwell's slow poison, telling himself she had chosen this life. The guilt was a living animal inside his chest, tearing at flesh and bone. He had loved her since that night in the trailer, loved her with a ferocity that frightened even him. Every day apart had been self-inflicted punishment for dragging danger to her door. But seeing her now, trapped in a gilded cage built by a man who would eventually destroy her, something snapped. He summoned his lieutenants. "Find everything on Caldwell," he ordered, voice deadly calm. "Every dirty deal, every lie. And watch Emily. If he lays one hand on her..." He couldn't finish the sentence. That night, Tony stood on his balcony in the freezing wind, staring towards Summerlin, remorse and love warring so violently he could barely breathe. He had let her go once to protect her. He would not make that mistake again. But Emily, in her new mansion with its marble floors and empty rooms, lay awake beside a husband who no longer touched her gently, feeling the old familiar cold seep into her bones, despite central heating. She told herself she had made the right choice. In the deepest part of her heart, where truth lived unacknowledged, she knew she had run from the only man who had ever seen her clearly, and straight into the arms of a liar. And sometimes, when Ryan was gone and the house was silent, she would stand at the window staring toward the distant lights of the Strip and wonder if Tony Rossi ever thought of her at all. The wind howled around the mansion, the same way it once howled around the trailer. Some nights, poverty of spirit hurt worse than poverty of pocket. By October of the year 2025, the mansion in Summerlin felt less like a home and more like a beautiful cage. The marble floors echoed under my bare feet, the infinity pool sparkled day and night, and the walk-in closet held dresses I had never chosen for myself. Ryan called it our palace. I called it a place where the silence pressed harder than the desert wind ever had back in the trailer. Noah was 11 now, tall for his age, but still thin, still watchful. He had his own room with a gaming computer Ryan bought to keep him quiet. I had learned to smile when Ryan brought gifts, to thank him softly, to keep my voice polite and small, the way it had always been when I was powerless. Inside, the old hunger had been replaced by a different emptiness, one that came from pretending. Ryan had changed in the last year. The charm that once blinded me had thinned into something sharper. He stayed out later, came home smelling of other women's perfume, spoke to me like I was an employee who had forgotten her place. When I asked about money, why the credit cards were suddenly declined, why contractors stopped showing up at his sites, he laughed and told me pretty women shouldn't worry about numbers. I worried anyway. I worried when the housekeeper was let go without warning, and I found myself scrubbing toilets in a house I didn't own. I worried when Noah's school sent letters about unpaid tuition, and Ryan waved them away, saying, "I'll handle it next week." I worried most when I discovered I was 6 months pregnant, something Ryan greeted with a tight smile and the words, "Well, that'll look good for the anniversary party." The party. He planned it for the last Saturday in October, inviting 800 people, politicians, investors, casino owners, anyone who could help him climb higher. The invitations went out on heavy cream cardstock with gold lettering. Caterers arrived in fleets of white vans. Florists filled the mansion with white orchids that cost more than I once earned in a month at the diner. I stood in the master bedroom the morning of the party, staring at the red dress Ryan had chosen for me. It was silk, floor length, cut to show the gentle swell of my pregnancy. Beautiful, expensive, cold against my skin when I tried it on. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, cheeks still hollow beneath carefully applied makeup, eyes too large, too wary. Noah knocked softly. "Mom, are you okay?" I forced a smile. "Just nervous about all the people." He hesitated. "Mr. Caldwell said I have to stay upstairs tonight, that kids don't belong at adult parties." I nodded, throat tight. Another small, unfair thing in a long list of them. Downstairs, workers transformed the backyard into something out of a magazine. The infinity pool glowed electric blue, surrounded by floating lanterns. Long tables groaned under ice sculptures and champagne fountains. A string quartet tuned instruments on a stage near the cabanas. Security guards in black suits stood at every gate. Ryan said it was for safety, but their eyes scanned the crowd like they expected trouble. I wandered through it all in a daze, touching nothing, feeling like an intruder in my own life. Across town, in the penthouse that crowned his newest casino tower, Tony Rossi stood at the same floor-to-ceiling windows he had stood at for 7 years. The city spread below him like a circuit board of light, but his gaze was fixed on one distant cluster of mansions in Summerlin. His men had brought him the invitation 2 weeks earlier, delivered anonymously, Ryan's way of taunting him. Tony had not responded. Instead, he had intensified the quiet war he had been waging since Emily walked away. Every dirty contract Ryan signed with the Moretti cartel, Tony's investigators documented. Every offshore account, every falsified financial statement, every threat Ryan made to contractors who asked for payment. Tony collected it all. He told himself it was justice. Deep down, he knew it was love turned inside out, a way to punish the man who had taken what Tony could not allow himself to claim. The remorse had never left him. It had only grown, feeding on every photograph of Emily looking thinner, every report of Ryan's cruelty. Tony woke night sweating, dreaming of the alley, of her small hands stitching his wound while she herself was starving. He had let her go to protect her, and in doing so had delivered her into worse hands. Now the party loomed like a deadline. His lieutenant, Marco, entered without knocking. "Boss, Caldwell's security is heavy tonight. Moretti's men are mixed in with the guards. They're expecting you to show." Tony's jaw tightened. "They're hoping I'll make a scene, give them an excuse." Marco waited. Tony turned from the window. "I won't give them one, but I will be there." Marco's eyes widened. "Alone?" Tony didn't answer. He was already moving toward the closet, selecting a black tuxedo that cost more than most people's cars. As he dressed, the conflict inside him raged harder than any street confrontation he had ever faced. He loved her. God help him, he loved her with a force that had only deepened over the years of silence. Every day apart had carved the feeling deeper, until it was the only truth he had left. But love, for a man like him, was a weapon turned inward. To go to her meant bringing danger. To stay away meant watching her suffer. There was no clean choice, only the one that hurt least. Late afternoon sun slanted across the Summerlin mansion as guests began arriving in limousines and sports cars that gleamed like jewels. Women in sequins, men in tailored suits, laughter that sounded too loud, too practiced. Ryan circulated with a glass of champagne, shaking hands, telling stories about his next big development, the one that would finally put him on the map. I stood near the pool, one hand resting protectively on my belly, smiling politely when introduced. Inside, I felt dizzy, detached, as if watching someone else's life. The baby kicked hard, a reminder that this child would be born into a world of marble and lies. A woman I didn't know asked how I was enjoying all this, gesturing at the opulence. I murmured something soft and non-committal. She laughed and moved on. The unfairness of it pressed down like humidity before a storm. I had once scrubbed blood from a stranger's wound with shaking hands. I had once chosen between buying milk or paying the electric bill. Now I wore a dress that could have fed us for a year and still felt poorer than ever. Ryan found me near dusk. His hand closed around my upper arm, tight, proprietary. "Smile bigger, sweetheart," he said through his teeth. "Tonight's important." I nodded, voice small. "Yes, Ryan." He released me and moved on to greet a politician. I slipped away to the edge of the pool, needing air. The water stretched out like black glass, reflecting the first stars and the glowing lanterns. For a moment, I was back in the trailer, wind howling, Noah's small hand in mine, at least honest in our struggle. A sudden wave of nausea hit, part pregnancy, part despair. I pressed a hand to my mouth, steadying myself against a stone column. From the shadows of the second-floor balcony, unseen by the laughing crowd below, Tony Rossi watched. He had arrived hours earlier, slipping past security with the ease of a man who owned the night. Now he stood motionless, gray eyes fixed on the woman in red who stood alone by the water. She was more beautiful than memory, and more fragile. The dress clung to her changed body, but he saw the thinness in her wrists, the exhaustion in her posture. The sight tore at him like blades. His hand tightened on the railing until knuckles whitened. Below, Ryan's mistress, an ambitious attorney named Lauren Brooks, approached Emily with a smile sharp as glass. Tony's entire body went rigid. He knew what was coming. His men had intercepted whispers of Ryan's plan to humiliate Emily publicly, to show the world she was disposable, to send a message. Tony had come prepared to stop it. But watching Emily now, isolated, radiant, breakable, something inside him fractured wide open. The love he had buried for 7 years surged up, hot and violent and undeniable. It filled his chest until breathing hurt. He would burn the entire city down before he let anyone touch her again. The party lights flickered on fully as night fell, casting the pool in electric blue. Music swelled, laughter rose. And in the quiet before the storm, two hearts, one in darkness above, one in light below, beat with the same unbearable ache. Neither knew yet that everything was about to change. The October night air carried a chill that slipped beneath the silk of my red dress and found the bones I had never quite managed to warm since the trailer days. Hundreds of guests swirled around the glowing pool, their laughter rising like expensive perfume. I stood near the edge, one hand cradling the curve of my belly, trying to breathe through the tightness in my chest. Ryan had been drinking. I could see it in the flush of his cheeks, the way his smile had sharpened into something cruel. He moved through the crowd with Lauren Brooks on his arm, an elegant attorney in shimmering silver, her hand possessive on his sleeve. Every time their eyes met, they laughed at a joke no one else heard. I pretended not to notice, the way I had learned to pretend so many things. A microphone appeared in Ryan's hand. The string quartet lowered their bows. 800 faces turned toward him. "Friends," he began, voice carrying over the speakers hidden in the landscaping. "Tonight we celebrate 5 years of marriage to this woman right here." He gestured grandly toward me. Cameras lifted, phones rose like a forest of glass. My heart stuttered. He walked over, took my free hand, and pulled me gently to the center of the patio near the pool's edge. The lights made the water look like liquid sapphire. I felt every stare, every whisper. "Emily has been an experience," Ryan continued, and the crowd chuckled politely. "She came from nothing, North Las Vegas trailer parks, waitressing at greasy diners, the whole heartbreaking story." More laughter, louder now. "And I gave her everything. This house, security, a future for her kid, even this little surprise on the way." He patted my belly with theatrical affection. Heat flooded my face. I tried to smile, but my lips trembled. Lauren stepped closer, champagne flute in hand, her eyes glittering. Ryan leaned into the microphone again. "But let's be honest, some people never really leave the trailer behind, do they? They cling to old fears, like swimming." His voice dripped mock sympathy. "My wife never learned how. Terrified of water deeper than a bathtub. Isn't that sad?" The laughter swelled, no longer polite. I felt the world tilt. My legs went numb. "Ryan," I whispered, soft and pleading, the way I had whispered so many times when bills piled up and hope ran out. "Please don't." He ignored me. "Lauren," he said loudly, "why don't you help Emily face her fears? Show her how we do things now that she's one of us." Lauren's smile was razor thin. The crowd parted, sensing spectacle. I backed away one step, then another, until the pool's edge pressed cold against my calves. "Ryan, no," I said again, louder this time, but my voice cracked like thin ice. He nodded to Lauren. She moved faster than I expected. One manicured hand shoved hard between my shoulder blades. I felt myself falling backward, arms windmilling, a scream tearing from my throat as the night sky spun. The red silk dress billowed like blood in water. Then the shock of cold as I hit the surface. Deep end, 8 feet, maybe more. Water closed over my head. I had never learned to swim. Panic exploded. I kicked wildly, but the dress tangled around my legs like chains. Water flooded my mouth, my nose. I clawed upward, broke the surface once, gasping, only to sink again. The baby. Oh God, the baby. I curled around my belly as lights blurred above me, muffled laughter echoing through the water like a nightmare. My lungs burned, my limbs grew heavy. I thought of Noah upstairs, alone. Of cold trailer nights, when at least the struggle had been honest. Of a pair of gray eyes in an alley long ago that had looked at me like I mattered. Everything went dark. High above, on the shadowed balcony, Tony Rossi watched it happen. He had seen Ryan's hand tighten on the microphone, had seen Lauren's predatory smile, had felt the exact moment Emily's face crumpled. When she fell, a sound escaped him, half roar, half broken prayer. He vaulted the railing without thinking, landing hard on the patio below. Guests scattered in confusion, but he was too far. The pool was too wide. He watched her struggle, watched her go under the second time, and something inside him shattered beyond repair. 7 years of restraint, of guilt, of telling himself he was protecting her by staying away. All of it burned away in that instant. He sprinted toward the pool, tearing off his tuxedo jacket as he ran, but even as he dove, he knew he might be too late. The water was shockingly cold. He swam with powerful strokes, eyes open in the blue glow, searching. There, red silk sinking like a wounded bird. He reached her in seconds that felt like years, wrapped one arm around her chest, and kicked hard for the surface. When they broke through, she was limp, water streaming from her mouth. He hauled her to the shallow steps, cradling her against him as he pressed 2 fingers to her throat. Pulse, weak, but there. "Emily," he said, voice raw. "Come on, breathe." He tilted her head, breathed for her, once, twice, until she coughed violently, expelling water, gasping in ragged sobs. The crowd had gone silent. Phones still recorded, but no one laughed now. Tony shrugged out of his soaked shirt, wrapped it around her shivering body, and lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Her head fell against his shoulder, wet hair clinging to both of them. Ryan found his voice. "Who the hell?" Tony's gray eyes lifted. The look he gave Ryan stopped the words in his throat. 3 black Escalades roared up the driveway at that exact moment, tires screeching. Doors flew open. Tony's men poured out, 6, 8, 10, spreading across the patio with quiet, lethal efficiency. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't need to. Their presence alone froze every guest in place. Ryan took one involuntary step back. Lauren's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the stone. Emily stirred in Tony's arms, eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she seemed disoriented, dizzy, the world spinning. Then recognition hit. "Tony?" she whispered, voice small and broken, the same soft voice that had once asked why she was saving a stranger. He looked down at her, water dripping from his dark hair, his face stripped of every defense he had worn for 7 years. "I'm here," he said simply. "I'm finally here." Her fingers clutched weakly at his soaked shirt. Tears mixed with pool water on her cheeks. Around them, the opulent party, the orchids, the champagne fountains, the infinity pool glowing like a jewel, suddenly looked cheap, tawdry, a stage built for cruelty. Emily closed her eyes against the stairs, against the humiliation that still burned hotter than the desert sun ever had in the trailer. She had escaped poverty only to be drowned in wealth's worst excess. In Tony's arms, for the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Safe. But safety, she knew, came at a cost, and tonight, someone was going to pay it. Tony carried her past the silent crowd, past Ryan's white face and Lauren's sudden terror, toward the waiting vehicles. His men formed a protective ring. Behind them, the party lights kept shining, beautiful and merciless. Inside Tony's chest, the love he had carried like a wound for 7 years finally broke free. Fierce, consuming, impossible to contain any longer. He had failed her once by staying away. He would not fail her again. As the Escalade doors closed and the vehicles pulled away, Emily rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, strong, steady, alive. In the silence between them, years of separation, of unfairness, of cold nights and empty promises, began to crack and fall away. Something new, something terrifying and bright, stirred in the space they left behind. Neither of them was ready for how fiercely it would burn. I came back to the world slowly, coughing, shivering, the taste of chlorinated water thick in my throat. My body felt heavy, as if the pool had tried to claim me and only partly failed. Strong arms held me close, warm, solid, familiar in a way that made no sense through the fog in my head. I forced my eyes open. Tony Rossi's face filled my vision, water dripping from his dark hair, gray eyes wide with something raw and terrified. His white dress shirt clung to him, soaked through, outlining every line of muscle I had once stitched together in a freezing trailer. He was breathing hard, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other pressed protectively over my belly. For a moment, the party noise faded. There was only his heartbeat against my ear, fast, frantic, alive. "Emily," he said, voice rough with relief and something deeper. "Stay with me." I tried to speak, but another cough racked me. Cold seeped through the wet silk dress, through my skin, straight into the old places that had never truly warmed since those wind-bitten nights in the trailer. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. He shifted, wrapping his ruined tuxedo jacket around me tighter, shielding me from the hundreds of staring eyes. I felt the weight of them, phones still raised, whispers rising like smoke. Humiliation burned hotter than the chill. Ryan's voice cut through the haze. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Tony didn't look away from me. His jaw clenched so hard I saw the muscle jump. Only then did I realize he had been watching before he jumped. He had seen everything. The truth hit me like a second plunge into cold water. Tony hadn't arrived with the Escalades. He had been here already. Hidden. Close enough to dive in the instant I fell. He had witnessed my lowest moment and chosen to reveal himself only when I was sinking. The thought brought a wave of dizziness. I clutched at his shirt, fingers numb. How long were you?" "Long enough," he said quietly, so only I could hear. Pain flickered across his face, pain and guilt sharp enough to cut. "I'm sorry I didn't stop it sooner." His men were moving now, forming a wall between us and the crowd. Guests backed away, uncertainty replacing their earlier amusement. Ryan stood frozen near Lauren, his face draining of color as recognition dawned. I buried my face against Tony's shoulder, unable to bear the stares. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the chaos. Tears mixed with pool water on my cheeks. Tony rose in one fluid motion, lifting me effortlessly. My head spun at the sudden height, the world tilting. He carried me toward the stone steps at the shallow end, water streaming from us both. That was when I understood the full twist. He had been on the second-floor balcony the entire evening. He had watched Ryan parade Lauren, watched the microphone appear, watched me stand alone by the pool, hand on my belly, trying not to cry. He had seen Lauren approach, seen the shove coming, and still waited until the very last second before acting. Why? The question burned, but I was too cold, too shaken to ask. Tony carried me past the silent guests, past the glowing orchids and champagne fountains that suddenly looked grotesque. His men parted for him like water. One opened the rear door of the nearest Escalade. Inside, the warmth hit me like a blow. Leather seats, soft lighting, the faint scent of expensive cologne. Tony's world, miles away from the duct-taped trailer windows and canned beans. He settled me gently on the seat, kneeling in front of me, peeling off his soaked jacket to wrap a thick blanket around my shoulders instead. His hands trembled, barely, but I saw it. "You're safe now," he said. "I promise." I looked at him then, really looked. 7 years had deepened the lines around his eyes, silvered a few strands at his temples, but he was still the most beautiful man I had ever seen. Powerful, wealthy beyond anything I could imagine, and staring at me like I was the only thing in the world worth saving. The contrast hit me hard. I was 34 now, 6 months pregnant by a man who had just tried to drown me for sport. My dress, once red silk, now ruined, clung cold and heavy. My hair dripped onto Italian leather. I had nothing. No money, no power, no dignity left. He had everything. And yet he knelt at my feet, water pooling around his knees, looking like a man who would trade it all to take back the last 10 minutes. The inner tearing in his heart was visible in every line of his body. I had never seen remorse like it. Tony reached for my hands, chafing them gently between his larger ones. "I should have come sooner," he whispered. "I thought if I stayed hidden, watched from a distance, I could protect you without dragging you into my world. I was wrong. God, Emily, I was so wrong." His voice cracked on my name. I stared at our joined hands, his strong, manicured, warm, mine thin, scarred from diner burns, ice cold. The disparity had never been clearer. "Why were you here tonight?" I asked, voice small and hoarse. He met my eyes. "Because I couldn't stay away anymore. Not on the night he planned to hurt you worst." "You knew?" "I've known every move he's made for years." The confession hung between us. "I've watched over you since the alley, always from a distance, always hating myself for it." The Escalade door closed with a soft thud, sealing us in privacy. His men stood guard outside. Silence stretched, thick with 7 years of unspoken things. I began to shiver again, not from cold, but from the violent surge of emotion crashing through me. Horror at what had happened, confusion at Tony's presence, fear of what came next, and beneath it all, something warmer, brighter, terrifying. The love I had buried the night I drove away from him in that parking lot. It stirred now, stretching after long sleep. Tony saw it in my face, his breath caught. "Don't," he said softly. "Don't look at me like that. Not yet. You've been through too much tonight." But I couldn't help it. He had waited in shadows for years, torn between protecting me and claiming me. He had watched me choose wrong, suffer quietly, and still stayed close enough to dive when I fell. No one had ever loved me like that. No one had ever loved me at all, I realized with a stab of pain. Fresh tears spilled over. Tony brushed them away with his thumbs, touch infinitely gentle. "I'm getting you warm," he said practically. "Then we're taking you to a doctor. The baby's kicking," I whispered, hard, like she's angry. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Good. She's a fighter, like her mother." He reached for a panel in the door, pressed buttons. Warm air began flowing from hidden vents. He produced a thermos, hot tea, sweet and strong, and held it to my lips until I could manage it myself. Every small care felt enormous against the backdrop of my life's unfairness. I drank, watching him over the rim. His shirt clung transparently, revealing the scar I had stitched all those years ago. My fingers itched to touch it, to trace the proof that I had once saved him too. Outside, raised voices, Ryan arguing with Tony's men. A woman's sharp protest, Lauren. Tony's expression hardened, but he didn't move. "They won't touch you again," he said. Ever. The promise settled over me like the blanket, warm, heavy, absolute. I believed him, and that terrified me most of all. Because believing Tony Rossi meant stepping fully into his world. It meant accepting that the man who had everything had chosen to risk it all for a woman who had nothing. It meant facing the love that had waited 7 years in silence. The inner conflict tore at me, gratitude warring with fear, suspicion with longing. Tony watched every emotion cross my face, his own eyes stormy. "I won't force anything," he said quietly. "When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here, same as always." The Escalade began to move, gliding smoothly away from the mansion lights. Behind us, the party dissolved into chaos. Ahead, the city glittered. Tony's city. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone in it. The Escalade moved through the Las Vegas night like a dark ship cutting through neon waves. I sat wrapped in the blanket Tony had given me, still dripping, still shaking, the taste of pool water lingering at the back of my throat. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, casinos towering like golden palaces, billboards promising fortunes I had never been allowed to dream of. Inside the vehicle, warmth slowly returned to my fingers and toes, but the cold inside my chest stayed. I kept replaying the fall, the laughter, the way Ryan's face had twisted with contempt right before Lauren pushed. 7 years of trying to believe I had escaped poverty, and tonight it had all been stripped away in front of 800 strangers. Tony sat beside me, close but not touching, his soaked shirt clinging to his broad shoulders. He had wrapped a dry towel around himself, but water still darkened his hair. Every few seconds, his gray eyes flicked to me, checking, always checking, as if I might vanish if he looked away too long. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Instead, I stared at my hands knotted in the blanket, thin wrists sticking out like a child's. He broke the silence first. "We're going to my compound outside the city. There's a doctor waiting. Noah's already there. My men picked him up from the mansion 20 minutes ago." My head snapped up. "Noah?" "He's safe," Tony said quickly. "Watching movies in the guest wing with Maria, my housekeeper. He thinks it's an adventure." Relief flooded me so sharply my eyes stung. Then suspicion followed. "How did you know to get him?" "Because I know everything about you, Emily." His voice was soft, almost broken. "I've known for years." The confession hung between us, heavy as the desert night. I looked away, out the window again. The strip fell behind us as we left the city limits, heading into darker desert where stars began to show. The unfairness of it all pressed down, how Tony could arrange my son's safety with one phone call, while I had spent years scraping together bus fare for doctor visits. Minutes later, the convoy turned onto a private road flanked by high stone walls. Gates opened silently. Floodlights revealed manicured grounds, palm trees swaying gently, a sprawling estate that looked more like a resort than a home. Fountains glowed soft blue. Security men nodded as we passed. I had never felt smaller. The Escalade stopped under a portico of white marble. Doors opened. Tony stepped out first, then reached for me. I hesitated, legs unsteady when my feet touched the ground. The night air was cooler here, away from the city heat, and I swayed. He caught me instantly, one arm sliding around my waist. Easy. I let him support me, had no choice, and we moved inside. The foyer soared 2 stories high, crystal chandeliers scattering light like diamonds. Polished marble floors stretched endlessly. Fresh flowers filled vases on tables that probably cost more than my old trailer. Everything smelled clean, expensive, safe. A gray-haired woman in a crisp uniform waited with a wheelchair and warm towels. "Mr. Rossi, Dr. Alvarez is ready." Tony shook his head. "No wheelchair." And he lifted me again, carrying me up a wide staircase as if I weighed nothing. I should have protested, but exhaustion and shock had numbed me. My head rested against his shoulder without permission. He carried me into a bedroom larger than my entire trailer had been. Soft lighting, king bed with white linens, French doors opening onto a balcony overlooking dark desert. A female doctor waited beside a portable ultrasound machine. Tony laid me gently on the bed, then stepped back, giving the doctor space, but staying close. Dr. Alvarez was kind, efficient. She checked my vitals, listened to the baby's heartbeat, strong, steady, applied warm compresses, gave me something mild for the shock. All the while, Tony stood against the wall, arms folded, eyes never leaving me. When the doctor finished and declared us both stable, she left quietly. Silence returned, deeper now. I pulled the fresh blanket higher, suddenly aware of how I must look. Ruined dress, makeup streaked, hair tangled. Tony's world, I was wreckage washed ashore. He moved to the bedside chair, sat, and leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I owe you explanations," he said. I nodded, throat tight. He took a slow breath. "After the alley, I promised myself I'd repay you without pulling you into my life. So I helped from a distance. When you started seeing Caldwell, I investigated him. Found the money laundering, the cartel ties, the lies. I warned you." Memory of that freezing parking lot stung. "I thought you were trying to control me." Pain crossed his face. "I know. And when you chose him anyway, I respected it. Told myself you deserved normal. But I couldn't stop watching. Couldn't stop caring." The word hung, too small for what I saw in his eyes. He continued, voice rougher. "Every report of how he treated you, every time he made you smaller, I hated myself more for staying away. Tonight was the breaking point. My men learned about the party stunt days ago. I came early, planning to intervene quietly. But when I saw you standing by that pool, looking so alone..." He stopped, jaw working. "I waited too long. I almost lost you." Tears slipped down my temples into my hair. Tony reached out, brushed them away with careful fingers. "I'm done hiding. Done letting you suffer to keep you safe from me. From this moment, anyone who hurts you answers to me." His hand lingered against my cheek, warm, steady. I turned into the touch without thinking. "Tony, I don't understand why. I'm nobody. I have nothing to give you." He made a low sound, almost wounded. "You saved my life when you had every reason not to. You raised a good kid on scraps and stubbornness. You kept your kindness after the world tried to beat it out of you." His thumb traced my cheekbone. "You're everything, Emily. You always have been." The words struck deeper than any rescue. I had spent years feeling worthless. Trailer trash who'd traded up only to be reminded I never really left the trailer behind. Now this man, this powerful, wealthy man who could have anyone, looked at me like I was treasure. The inner tearing grew unbearable. Suspicion warred with longing, fear with need, poverty's old shame with the first taste of being truly seen. I started to cry in earnest, quiet, heaving sobs I couldn't stop. Tony moved onto the bed beside me, gathering me carefully against his chest. He held me while I fell apart, one hand stroking my damp hair, murmuring soft reassurances in Italian I didn't understand but felt in my bones. When the storm passed, I was curled against him, his heartbeat steady under my ear. He spoke into my hair. "Sleep now. Tomorrow we deal with the rest. Tonight you're safe." I wanted to protest that safety with him came with danger, that love from a man like Tony Rossi would change everything. But exhaustion won. Just before sleep took me, I felt his lips press gently to my forehead, a kiss so tender it hurt. In the hallway outside, Tony's men stood guard. In the master control room downstairs, screens showed Ryan Caldwell pacing his study, shouting into phones that no longer connected. Accounts frozen, investors pulling out, whispers of federal investigations spreading. The storm Tony had held back for 7 years had finally arrived, and nothing in Las Vegas would ever be the same. Morning light filtered through gauzy curtains when I woke, soft and golden in a way the harsh desert sun had never been through the trailer's cracked windows. For a disoriented moment, I didn't know where I was. Then memory flooded back, the pool, the fall, Tony's arms pulling me from darkness. I was in the same vast bedroom, dressed now in a soft cotton nightgown someone had changed me into while I slept. My ruined red dress lay folded on a chair, a sad reminder. The baby moved gently, as if reassuring me she was still there. The door opened quietly. Tony entered carrying a tray, fresh fruit, toast, herbal tea steaming in fine china. He had changed into a charcoal sweater and dark trousers, hair still slightly damp from a shower. He looked rested, but the shadows under his gray eyes told another story. "Good morning," he said softly, setting the tray on the bedside table. "How do you feel?" I sat up slowly, pulling the covers higher. Better, sore throat, a little dizzy. My voice came out small, timid, the way it always did when I felt out of place. He nodded, pouring tea with careful hands. "Doctor will check again soon. Noah's eating breakfast downstairs with Maria. He asked about you first thing." Tears pricked unexpectedly. "Thank you." Tony handed me the cup, fingers brushing mine. The touch lingered a second longer than necessary. He sat in the same chair as last night, close enough that I could smell clean soap and something uniquely him. We sipped in silence for a moment, the kind of quiet that felt full rather than empty. Then he spoke. "I need to tell you what happens next." I set the cup down, stomach tightening. He leaned forward. "Ryan Caldwell's world is ending today." The words were calm, matter-of-fact, but carried weight that made the air heavier. Tony continued. "For 5 years, my people have collected evidence: money laundering for the Moretti cartel, embezzlement from investors, falsified contracts, offshore accounts. Last night, while you slept, I gave the signal. Bank accounts frozen, investors notified, Nevada Gaming Commission and FBI alerted. By noon, he'll have nothing left." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Just like that?" "Just like that." His eyes were steady. "He humiliated you in front of the city. He endangered you and the baby. There's a price." A wave of dizziness washed over me. I had spent years powerless, begging landlords for extensions, rationing food, smiling politely while Ryan spent thousands on parties and mistresses. Now, one man's decision erased it all. It felt unreal, terrifying, intoxicating. "And Lauren?" I whispered. "Complicit. She structured the hidden accounts. Her firm's partners are being informed this morning. State Bar will follow." He paused. "They both thought they could touch you and walk away." The protectiveness in his voice sent warmth spreading through my chest, chasing away lingering cold. Downstairs, a door opened and small footsteps pounded up the stairs. Noah burst in, eyes wide. "Mom!" I opened my arms. He climbed carefully onto the bed, mindful of my belly, and hugged me tight. He smelled like pancakes and little boy. Tony watched us with an expression I couldn't name, soft, aching. Noah turned to him. "Mr. Rossi, Maria says you have a pool that's heated. Can we swim later?" Tony smiled, the first real one I'd seen. "Anytime you want, kid." Noah grinned and snuggled against me. After he left to explore the game room Maria promised, Tony and I were alone again. I gathered courage. "What about me? The baby isn't Ryan's choice, but it's still his." Tony's face darkened. He stood, walked to the French doors, stared out at the desert view. Tension rolled off him in waves. "He doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as you," he said finally, voice low. "But the child is innocent. Whatever you decide, keep, raise alone, whatever support you need, I'll provide." The offer hung between us, enormous. I studied his rigid back. "Why, Tony? Why do all this for us?" He turned slowly. The inner conflict was etched deep. Remorse, longing, fear. Because 7 years ago, a half-starved waitress dragged a bleeding stranger into her home and saved his life when she barely had enough for her own child. His voice roughened. Because every day since, I've carried that debt and something bigger. Because watching you suffer under Caldwell's roof has been my personal hell. He crossed the room in 2 strides, dropped to one knee beside the bed. "I love you, Emily." The confession came raw, shaking. I've loved you since the night you stitched me up with shaking hands and gave me your last antibiotics. I stayed away thinking distance was mercy. I was wrong. If you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for every cold night, every skipped meal, every tear you cried alone. Tears streamed down my face. The words were everything I had never dared dream in the darkest trailer nights. But fear followed fast. Your world is dangerous, I whispered. I saw your men last night. I know who you are. Pain flashed across his features. I won't lie. There are risks. But no one will ever touch you or Noah or the baby while I'm breathing. I'm stepping back from the worst parts, legitimizing more every year. For you, I'd walk away from all of it if you asked. The sincerity broke something open inside me. I reached out, touched his cheek, warm, stubbled, real. I'm scared, I admitted, voice trembling. But I'm more scared of going back to being invisible. He turned his face into my palm, eyes closing. You were never invisible to me. The moment stretched, electric. Then his phone vibrated. He checked the screen, expression hardening. It's starting. He helped me dress in borrowed clothes, soft yoga pants, and an oversized sweater that swallowed me. We went downstairs to a wood-paneled study with multiple screens. Ryan's face filled one, news footage of federal agents entering his office building. Another showed investors fleeing a press conference. A third displayed Lauren being escorted from her law firm, face pale. Tony stood behind me, hands gentle on my shoulders. Ryan's assets, cars, boats, the mansion, were being seized in real time. I watched it unfold with a strange detachment, years of quiet humiliation reversing in hours. Noah wandered in, saw the screens, and slipped his hand into mine. Tony noticed, crouched to Noah's level. Your mom's safe now. No one will hurt her again. Noah studied him solemnly, then nodded. By evening, news broke of Ryan's arrest. Federal charges, no bail. Lauren followed hours later. Tony turned off the screens. The mansion staff prepared dinner. Roast chicken, fresh vegetables, chocolate cake for Noah. We ate in a dining room that could seat 20, just the three of us at one end. Noah chattered about the heated pool and the dogs in the kennel. I listened, marveling at how normal it felt. After Noah went to bed, Tony walked me back to the guest wing. At the door, he stopped. I can give you separate quarters, more space, anything you need. His voice was careful. No pressure. I looked up at him, tall, powerful, eyes soft only for me. Stay? I asked, barely audible. His breath caught. He stepped inside, closed the door gently. We stood inches apart, years of distance collapsing. Then he kissed me, slow, reverent, asking permission. I answered by wrapping my arms around his neck. The kiss deepened, 7 years of longing igniting. His hands framed my face, careful of the baby between us. When we broke apart, foreheads touching, both breathing hard. I'll wait as long as you need, he whispered. I smiled through tears. I've waited long enough. Outside, the desert wind howled around the compound walls. Inside, something new and fierce began to burn. Retribution was complete. Healing was just beginning. 2 days after the party, the desert sun rose clear and merciless over Tony's compound, turning the stone walls gold and the pool water into a sheet of mirrored blue. I stood at the bedroom window, one hand resting on my belly, watching Noah splash happily with a gentle instructor Tony had hired. Laughter drifted up, my son's laughter, free and light in a way it had never been in the old mansion. Inside me, everything still felt bruised. Not just my throat from the water, but deeper. Places Ryan's cruelty had worn thin over years of quiet dismissals and sharp words. Tony had given me space since that first kiss. Sleeping in a guest room down the hall, checking on me often but never pressing. His restraint only made the pull toward him stronger. That afternoon, he found me in the library, a room of dark wood shelves and leather-bound books I was afraid to touch. I sat on a wide window seat, staring at nothing. He entered quietly, carrying a folder. His face was grim. "Emily," he said softly, "there's something you need to know before the news breaks." I turned, heart sinking at his tone. "What is it?" He sat beside me, close enough that our knees almost touched. "Ryan's been questioned by federal agents. He's trying to bargain, offering information on everyone he can name." I nodded slowly. That sounded like Ryan. Tony opened the folder but didn't hand it over yet. In the process, medical records came up, from your obstetrician. The air left my lungs. He met my eyes, gentle but unflinching. "The baby's conception date, it doesn't match what you told Ryan." Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I looked away, shame burning hot. My hands twisted in my lap. Tony waited. Finally, the words came, small and broken. 6 months ago, Ryan came home drunk, angry because a deal fell through. I'd found messages from Lauren on his phone, told him I was leaving after the baby came. I swallowed hard. He said no wife of his would embarrass him by walking out pregnant. He forced himself on me, said it would remind me who I belonged to. Tears slipped free. I didn't fight hard. I was afraid he'd hurt the baby if I did. Afterward, he acted like nothing happened, told everyone the pregnancy was planned. Tony went very still beside me. I risked a glance. His face had gone white, jaw clenched so tight I feared it would crack. His hands gripped the folder edges until the paper crumpled. The remorse and rage warring in his gray eyes were terrifying. "I should have killed him years ago," he whispered, voice shaking. "No," I said quickly, touching his arm. "You saved me. That's enough." "It's not enough." The words tore out of him. "I watched you suffer under his roof and did nothing because I thought you chose it. I let him—" He stopped, breathing ragged. He stood abruptly, walked to the window, back to me, shoulders rigid. I had never seen him like this, control fracturing. "I promised myself no one would hurt you again," he said to the glass. "But I already failed, before I even brought you here." The self-loathing in his voice broke my heart. I rose, went to him, placed a hand on his back. He was trembling. "Tony," my voice was soft, timid. "You didn't know." He turned then, eyes wet though no tears fell. "I suspected he was cruel. I saw the fear in your eyes in photographs, and I stayed away." His hands rose as if to touch me, then fell. "How can you even look at me?" "Because you're the only person who ever saw me," I whispered. "The real me, not the trailer girl, not the trophy wife, just Emily." He searched my face, desperate. I took his hands, large, strong, capable of so much power, yet gentle with me always. "The baby is innocent, but she's mine, not his, never his." Something shifted in his expression, fierce tenderness rising over the guilt. "Then she's ours," he said simply, "if you'll let me claim her too." The offer stole my breath. I had come from nothing. Nights when Noah cried from hunger and I gave him my share. Days when eviction loomed and I smiled through terror. Now, a man who owned half of Las Vegas offered to make my child his own. The contrast dizzied me. I swayed. Tony caught me instantly, guiding me back to the window seat. "Breathe," he murmured, kneeling again. I did, clutching his hands like lifelines. When the spinning stopped, I looked at him. "You'd really do that? Raise another man's—" "She's yours," he cut in gently. "That makes her perfect." Tears came again, but different now. Relief, wonder. He brushed them away. "I've loved you for 7 years without hope. Let me love this little one too. Let me give you both what you should have had all along." The inner tearing intensified, old shame battling new possibility. I had been powerless so long. Now power was offered freely, wrapped in love I had never earned. It felt too big, too good. "I don't know how to be part of this world," I admitted, voice small. "You don't have to be," he said. "Just be mine. The rest we'll figure out." He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. The kiss was different from the first, deeper, edged with shared pain. His hands framed my face reverently. When we parted, foreheads touching, both breathing unsteady. Downstairs, Noah's laughter drifted up again. Tony smiled against my lips. "Hear that? That's what our life sounds like now." I nodded, throat too tight for words. Later that day, federal charges against Ryan expanded, sexual assault added to the list. He would never see daylight as a free man again. Tony held me while I cried, not from fear this time, but from the weight of justice finally arriving. In the quiet after, he whispered promises against my hair: safety, family, love without conditions. And for the first time since the alley 7 years ago, I believed in tomorrow. The revelation had torn open old wounds, but in Tony's arms, they finally began to heal. 3 weeks had passed since the night of the party, and the compound had begun to feel almost like safety. Noah ran through the halls laughing, gaining weight on meals prepared by a chef who asked what he liked each morning. I slept through the night for the first time in years, wrapped in sheets that smelled of lavender and security. Tony was always near, reading reports in the study while I napped on the sofa, swimming laps while Noah practiced in the shallow end, sitting beside my bed when nightmares of water closing over my head woke me gasping. The love between us grew quietly at first, small touches, long looks, kisses that lingered longer each time. Then it caught fire. One desert evening on the terrace, with stars scattered like diamonds above us, he pulled me gently into his arms and kissed me until the world narrowed to only his mouth, his hands, his heartbeat. We stopped just short of more, mindful of the baby, but the promise burned bright. Ryan's downfall dominated headlines. Federal trials loomed. Lauren had fled the state, disbarred and ruined. The Moretti cartel, furious at losing their money man, had gone quiet, for now. I should have known quiet never lasted. It was a warm November afternoon when Tony's phone rang during lunch. He glanced at the screen, expression tightening. "Moretti," he said simply, standing. "Stay inside with Noah. Lock the doors behind me." Fear spiked cold through me. "Tony!" He cupped my face, gray eyes fierce. "I'll handle it. Trust me." I nodded, throat tight. He kissed me hard once, then left with 6 of his men in 2 black SUVs. I watched from the window as they disappeared down the long drive. Hours crawled by. Noah sensed my worry and stayed close, coloring quietly at the kitchen island. I paced, one hand on my belly, memories of trailer nights flooding back, waiting for bad news that always came. At dusk, Tony's lead security man, Marco, entered the kitchen. His face was grim. "Mrs. Harper, Mr. Rossi asked me to bring you and the boy to the safe room downstairs. Now." The word safe room turned my blood to ice. What's happening? Moretti's people are moving. They blame Mr. Rossi for Caldwell's arrest. We've got reports of vehicles heading this way. I gathered Noah without questions. He clutched his favorite stuffed dinosaur as we descended hidden stairs to a steel-reinforced room deep beneath the house. Thick door, monitors showing every angle of the property, emergency supplies. Marco sealed us in, promised guards outside. Then we waited. Monitors showed the front gates, distant but clear. 3 dark SUVs approached slowly, no lights. My heart pounded so hard I felt dizzy. On one screen, Tony's convoy returned at speed, cutting off the intruders. Both groups stopped 50 yards apart on the private road. Tony stepped out alone, hands visible. A man emerged from the lead Moretti vehicle, tall, silver-haired, unmistakably Victor Moretti himself. They spoke. I couldn't hear, but body language was tense. Then Victor smiled, cold, triumphant, and raised a hand. Red dots appeared on Tony's chest. Snipers. I gasped, hand flying to my mouth. Noah whimpered. On screen, Tony didn't flinch. He said something that made Victor's smile falter. Then chaos. Tony's men poured from hidden positions along the wall, dozens, armed but disciplined. At the same moment, floodlights blazed, illuminating hidden vehicles blocking the road behind Moretti's group. Victor's face twisted in rage. He shouted an order. Shots rang out, sharp cracks echoing through the monitors. I pulled Noah against me, shielding his eyes. Tony dove behind his SUV as his men returned controlled fire. Tires burst, windows shattered. Moretti's drivers tried to reverse, but the road was blocked. It lasted less than 2 minutes. When the echoes faded, Moretti's men were on their knees, weapons confiscated. Victor stood cuffed, face bloodied from a shallow cut. Tony rose slowly, untouched. Relief flooded me so sharply my knees buckled. But then, movement on a side monitor. A fourth vehicle, missed somehow, roared from the desert brush toward the house. Straight toward the unguarded east wing. Straight toward us. Marco's voice crackled over intercom. Breach! East perimeter! Alarm screamed. The safe room door shuddered under impact. Noah cried out. I backed against the far wall, heart hammering. The door held. Once, twice. On the third impact, it buckled. 2 masked men burst in, rifles raised. I screamed, pushing Noah behind me. One grabbed my arm, yanking hard. Pain shot through my shoulder. Then gunfire, close, deafening. Both men dropped. Tony stood in the doorway, gun still raised, face pale with terror. He had run the entire length of the compound. Blood soaked his left sleeve, a bullet graze. He lowered the weapon, eyes scanning me frantically. Emily? I couldn't speak, legs gave out. He crossed the room in 2 strides, caught me before I hit the floor. Noah ran to us, clinging. Tony held us both, shaking. I've got you, he whispered over and over. I've got you. Later, after federal agents, tipped anonymously, arrived to take Victor and his surviving men, after doctors patched Tony's arm and checked me thoroughly, we sat in the quiet study. Moonlight spilled through windows. Tony's hands trembled as he poured whiskey he didn't drink. They used Caldwell's humiliation as bait, he said finally. Planned the whole party stunt to draw me out tonight. Thought if they took you, I'd trade everything to get you back. Horror numbed me. He set the glass down untouched. I almost lost you twice in 1 month, his voice cracked. First to water, now to bullets. He knelt in front of where I sat, took my hands. The inner conflict raged openly now, love and guilt tearing him apart. I brought this danger to your door, he rasped. My world almost killed you and Noah and the baby tonight. I cupped his face, feeling the tremor there. But you stopped it, I whispered. You always stop it. He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch. I can't lose you, Emily. Not after waiting 7 years. Not now that I finally have you. The second revelation settled over us like fallout. Victor's trap had been bold, unexpected, disguised as Ryan's petty cruelty, meant to end Tony's empire and take me as leverage. It had nearly worked. But Tony's love, patient, fierce, absolute, had turned their trap against them. The cartel lay broken. We were alive. In the hush after battle, Tony rested his forehead against my belly, listening to the baby kick. I took a bullet tonight, he said quietly. I'd take 100 more. I threaded fingers through his hair. And I'd pull you from water 1,000 times, I answered. We stayed like that until dawn painted the desert rose. Danger had come closer than ever, but so had we. The love that had waited in shadows for 7 years now burned bright enough to light the darkest night. And nothing, not poverty's ghosts, not Ryan's cruelty, not even bullets, could extinguish it. The night after the shootout, the compound was quiet again, but the silence felt different, charged, fragile, like glass still warm from the flame. Federal agents had come and gone, taking statements, hauling away Victor Moretti and what remained of his men. The East Wing door was already being repaired, bullet holes filled as if they had never existed. Tony's arm was bandaged, the graze shallow but angry red. He refused stronger pain medication, saying he needed to feel it, punishment for letting danger reach us. I found him in the study at dawn, standing at the window in the same blood-stiffened shirt, staring at the desert as light crept over the mountains. He hadn't slept. I paused in the doorway, barefoot in one of his oversized button-downs, belly rounding the fabric. "Tony." He turned. The torment in his gray eyes stole my breath. "I almost lost you," he said again, voice hoarse from hours of silence. Again. I crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate. When I reached him, I took his uninjured hand and placed it over my heart. "Feel that," I whispered. "It's still beating, because of you." His fingers curled against my chest, trembling. "I can't do this halfway anymore," he rasped, watching from shadows, holding back. "I need all of you, Emily. Or I need to let you go completely, for your safety." The threat of losing him hit harder than any bullet could have. I rose on my toes, framed his face with both hands. "You don't get to decide that for me anymore." And then I kissed him. Not gentle, not careful. I kissed him with every cold trailer night I had endured alone, every skipped meal, every tear shed in silence. I kissed him with 7 years of longing I hadn't even admitted to myself. He froze for one heartbeat, shock, fear, then responded with a hunger that matched mine. His good arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me close, mindful of the baby, but desperate all the same. The kiss turned fierce, consuming, teeth, tongue, breath shared until we were both shaking. When we broke apart, foreheads pressed together, he was breathing like he'd run miles. "Emily," he groaned, "I've dreamed of this every night for 7 years, but I never thought—" I silenced him with another kiss, softer this time, but deeper. We moved without words, his hand guiding me backward until I sat on the wide leather sofa. He followed, kneeling carefully between my knees, eyes searching mine for permission. I nodded. He kissed my throat, my collarbone, hands sliding under the shirt to trace the curve of my belly with reverence. Every touch was worship, slow, deliberate, as if memorizing. "I love you," he whispered against my skin. "I loved you when you had nothing. I love you more now that you have everything. I'll love you when we're old and gray." Tears slipped down my temples. No one had ever spoken to me like this. I had been invisible, disposable, a means to an end. Now I was cherished beyond reason. The inner tearing reached its peak, old shame screaming, "I didn't deserve this," new wonder insisting I did. I pulled him closer, fingers threading through his dark hair. We didn't go further than kisses and touches that night, too raw, too soon after violence. But the fire caught and spread. Days blurred into a haze of healing and discovery. Tony moved my things into the master suite, a room of soft creams and dark wood, windows opening onto private gardens. Noah's room was connected by a door he could open any time. Mornings, Tony brought breakfast trays himself. Fresh berries, warm croissants, eggs cooked exactly how I liked. He watched me eat with quiet satisfaction, as if feeding me healed something in him too. Afternoons, we walked the grounds, Noah running ahead, Tony's hands steady at my back. He told me stories of his childhood, losses that had hardened him, choices that haunted him. I told him about trailer nights when wind howled through cracks and Noah's fever scared me silent. Each confession bound us tighter. Evenings, after Noah slept, we sat by the fire pit under endless stars. One night, Tony took a bullet wound dressing off slowly, revealing the fresh scar. "I'll carry this gladly," he said. "Proof I protected what's mine." I traced it gently, then kissed the mark. "You're not a trophy," he added fiercely. "You're my home." The words undid me. I straddled his lap carefully, cupped his face. "I was poor in every way that mattered," I said softly. "Money, hope, love. You gave me all three." Our kiss that night was slower, deeper, passion tempered by wonder. We made love for the first time under moonlight spilling through bedroom windows. He was gentle beyond bearing, every touch asking, every movement worship. When I cried out his name, he whispered mine like prayer. Afterward, he held me against his chest, fingers stroking my hair. "I waited 7 years for this," he murmured, "worth every lonely night." I smiled against his skin. I didn't know I was waiting too. The love that had smoldered in shadows now blazed, intense, explosive, all-consuming. We learned each other's bodies and hearts with the urgency of people who had almost lost everything. Tony began stepping away from old business, selling questionable holdings, investing legitimately. He said it was for Noah and the baby, but I knew part was for himself, to be worthy of the light I brought. I started planning a small foundation, helping women escape situations like mine. Tony funded it quietly, proudly. Some nights nightmares came, water closing over me, gunfire echoing. Tony woke me gently, held me until I remembered I was safe. Some nights guilt haunted him, faces from his past. I kissed the scars, reminded him he had chosen different now. The fire between us never dimmed, it only grew, passionate, fierce, healing. In the ashes of violence, love had ignited, and nothing could put it out. 5 months later, in April of the year 2026, the desert bloomed with unexpected softness, wildflowers dusting the hills around Tony Rossi's compound in shades of gold and violet. Inside the private hospital wing he had built on the estate, I lay in a crisp white bed, sweat cooling on my forehead, a tiny bundle wrapped in soft pink against my chest. Hope Elizabeth Rossi, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, born just after midnight, nuzzled closer, her tiny fist curling around my finger. Tony sat beside me, his tailored charcoal suit rumpled from hours of pacing, his gray eyes red-rimmed but bright with awe. He hadn't left my side through 12 hours of labor, holding my hand, whispering encouragement, his voice breaking when Hope's first cry filled the room. Now he leaned forward, brushing a kiss across her forehead, then mine. "She's perfect," he murmured, voice thick, like her mother. I smiled, exhausted but whole in a way I hadn't known was possible. "She's ours." The word carried weight. 7 years of cold trailer nights, of hunger so deep it hollowed my bones, of believing I was less than nothing. I had been 34, thin as a shadow, sleep-deprived from double shifts at a greasy diner, my hands rough from scrubbing floors to keep Noah fed. I had endured wind that howled through cracked trailer windows, nights when I gave my son the last slice of bread and went to bed dizzy with hunger. Poverty had been my cage, its bars forged from unfairness, eviction notices, unpaid medical bills, the constant fear that one wrong move would take Noah away. Now, in this room of soft light and sterile warmth, surrounded by Tony's wealth, marble floors, private nurses, a crib carved from cherry wood, I felt the disparity more keenly than ever. His world was power and possibility. Mine had been survival and shame. Yet here we were, bound by a love that had burned through every barrier. The inner tearing hadn't stopped. It had only changed. Where once I wrestled with suspicion and fear, now I grappled with the enormity of being cherished. Tony's love was fierce, unrelenting, a force that had waited 7 years in silence, survived gunfire, and emerged stronger. It overwhelmed me still, this gift I hadn't earned. He felt it too, the conflict etched in his face every time he looked at Hope or me. Guilt lingered for the years he stayed away, remorse for the danger his world had brought. Last night, during a quiet moment between contractions, he had confessed, "I built an empire on choices I can't undo, but you and Hope, you're my chance to be more than my past." His words echoed now as I watched him cradle our daughter, his large hands impossibly gentle. The man who had faced down snipers without flinching was undone by a newborn sigh. Noah slipped into the room, 12 now, taller and stronger from months of good meals and safety. He climbed carefully onto the bed beside me, peering at Hope with wide eyes. "She's so small." "She'll grow," I said softly, brushing his hair back, "like you did." Tony looked at us, his family, pieced together from broken places, and his expression softened into something radiant. The past months hadn't been without shadows. Ryan Caldwell's trial dominated news cycles. His life sentence for fraud, money laundering, and assault a grim victory. Victor Moretti and his cartel faced their own reckonings, dismantled by Tony's quiet alliances with federal agents willing to trade favors. Lauren Brooks had vanished, her law career ashes. But Tony had changed too. He sold off the last of his underground operations, pouring money into legitimate ventures, hotels, renewable energy, community centers in North Las Vegas, where kids like Noah could find safety. He funded my foundation, now called Hope's Haven, helping women escape abuse and rebuild. Every step was his atonement, his way of rewriting the legacy he would leave for Hope and Noah. Yet the conflict within him raged on. Late at night, when he thought I was asleep, I'd find him standing over Hope's crib, face haunted. "I don't deserve this," he'd whisper. "Not after the blood on my hands." I'd pull him back to bed, kiss the scars, remind him that love didn't care about deserving. It simply was. One evening in March, under a desert sky heavy with stars, he had taken me to the high roller observation wheel on the Strip. He'd reserved the entire structure, and as our cabin climbed toward the sky, Las Vegas glittering below, he knelt with a simple silver band. "No diamonds because," he said, "your heart is the only jewel I need." "Marry me, Emily," he'd said, voice raw. "Let me spend forever proving I'm worthy of you." I'd said yes through tears, and we'd kissed until the world fell away. Now, in the hospital room, that promise felt closer than ever. I shifted Hope to my other arm, wincing slightly at the soreness. Tony noticed instantly, adjusting pillows with careful hands. "You need rest," he said. "So do you," I countered, smiling. He chuckled, a sound I'd once thought impossible from the man in that blood-soaked alley. Noah yawned, curling against me. "Can I stay here tonight?" "Of course," Tony said, pulling a blanket over him. We sat in quiet stillness, the kind that held a lifetime of unspoken vows. But the inner tearing lingered, for both of us. For me, it was the fear that this happiness was temporary, that poverty's ghosts would reclaim me. I had been the girl who chose between heat and food, who smiled through hunger to keep Noah's world steady. How could I trust a life where hunger was a memory? For Tony, it was the weight of his past against the purity of this moment. He had ordered men to their fates, built wealth on shadows. Hope's tiny hand in his was both salvation and judgment. Yet we held on, because love, we had learned, was stronger than fear or guilt. The lessons of our story were clear. Knowledge of one's worth could outshine any darkness. Knowledge of love's patience could heal old wounds. The education we gained through pain taught us that family wasn't blood, but choice. And the lesson of forgiveness, of self, of others, was the cornerstone of redemption. Knowledge of second chances gave us courage, and the education of standing up to cruelty gave us strength. The lesson of compassion, learned in a trailer and a penthouse alike, bound us. Knowledge that wealth and poverty couldn't separate true hearts was our foundation. And the lesson of resilience, standing back up, was our triumph. To everyone watching, I wish you good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Share your thoughts below. How does this story touch you? How does it connect to your own life? Subscribe to Alex Truths on YouTube, like and share to join us for more stories that stir the heart. We want to hear the emotions deep within your soul. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.